Hi, I'm Nick Sutner, co-founder and writer and producer and business guy, and we share creative direction on the game.
Yeah, and I'm Nico Recabarren, and I'm programmer and game designer.
So, talk about what this game's all about.
Yeah, this is a ranger, a role puzzling adventure, and hopefully our subtitle helps sort of sell some of the spirit where we're like, we're kind of Trojan horsing a puzzle game through the aesthetics and setting and vocabulary of like an adventure game and a role-playing game, so you're adventuring through a world and talking to characters, but we're keeping it pretty breezy, where it's sort of, things like inventory or just objects in the world that you push around. Our kind of unique mechanics so that everything exists on this big interconnected gameplay grid. So the whole world is a grid, and when you move on a row or column, anything on the same row or column like moves with you. And also you can loop around one edge to the other. So we introduced that pretty much at the start of the game. And the game doesn't really get harder, and we don't really add complexity. We just take that core mechanic and add lots of different interesting remixes and riffs and subvert it and just kind of make it an interesting experience versus sort of like going too deep in a traditional puzzle gamey way. And sort of, I love games like Into the Breach where you're like staring at the screen for like 20 minutes and you're like, I know the solution is here, I just can't find it. But we're trying to make something that's more feels like a breezy adventure game, where puzzles is like the language that unites combat and narrative and exploration and everything else.
Where did the idea for the game come from?
The idea, that concept of having to merge everything, like both like the world exploration and the puzzles, was mainly because of like our interest on trying to keep players like stuck in the game, like not stuck, like how do you say, like they keep playing the game, because sometimes puzzle games becomes like harder and harder with time, and we wanted to make it like so it feels like like Nick said, like breezy. So it's like you never get like stuck in a way that you can move on, or you never stop like you are not like transported to a level selection screen. It's like everything is like blended in the same thing.
I think unlike most puzzle games where it's like a sort of a series of standalone levels or puzzle rooms or whatever, ours we want it to be again a big sprawling like world that feels more like Zelda or a short hike or something like that. And where I assume this is part of the question too, Nico, what was the original idea for the game, even before the
This is always like kind of funny. Like I was making a prototype for like a 2D Rubik cube. So that's like the whole system is like like that. Yeah.
That's actually really clever.
Thank you.
Did you like back up over a Rubik's Cube with your car and you like smashed it flat and you were like, wait a minute?
He was making pancakes and had a wonderful idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're like cutting lines in a pancake. Yeah.
So one of the things I always hate about puzzle games is that people don't understand how much work goes into designing the puzzles. That's like, talk about that process and how involved it is.
Yeah, I think we actually like cheated a bit, because I feel like the first thing that Nick explained about like keeping like new ideas like coming through the game, that made it like I feel like more fun for us to make the puzzle games, the puzzles, because it's like we never get to that part where you have to be like super like intricate to find like connections of elements or stuff in the puzzle. It's more like we are only showing you like fun new idea after a new fun idea and so on. So we are always in the like honeymoon phase of the puzzle. So it's like it was like a very like fun experience.
I think also, Nico's definitely done like most of the design in the game, all the design. But I think the parts I've come to understand, like working with Nico and talking as a team of how to solve things too, is not even so much just the puzzle design itself, but things like, okay, if you make a mistake, can we add an undo button? What are the implications of that technically and design-wise? Do we want to be able to reset the buttons? Why, or reset the puzzle? Why and why not? Like, there's things like that too, where like a puzzle game is more than a puzzle game because you have to be able to sort of figure your way out of these things. And the theme of our game and a lot of the design is you sort of have to sort of make a mess and things get chaotic before you find your way through to the other side of it. But in practice, to implement that technically and to be able to stop players from breaking the game is easier said than done. Yeah.
In your game, A Ranger, what came first? The story followed by the puzzle design, or was it puzzle design first, then followed by story, or was it intermingled?
Nico had an early prototype he'd been working on and brought me onto the project, and then I brought our co-founder David on. And pretty quickly, I think, Nico had a really tight little nice demo, which is pretty much the backbones of the first town in the game, which is our demo that's out on Steam right now. And I think pretty quickly we sat down and we were like, okay, what kind of scope do we want? What do we want this game to be about? I think Nico had a lot of interesting versions of the mechanic already. Like, how do we want to contextualize these? And I think we talk a lot about our values and what we want to express in the game, both overtly and thematically and in the dialogue, and what we want the vibe to be. So I think it sort of came together like in parallel, I think, and then the design served the story, and the story served the design, and the art served both, and so they sort of all like take turns building. But definitely started from Nico's like core design in the beginning. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I always remember like David, the artist, David Hellman, that mentions that he was very inspired by the music by Tomás Batista to make the art. So it's like also like every element of the game was like feeding the other elements. So.
And I think our company structurally is like a flat partnership. There's no hierarchy. We're all equal co-founders. And I think because we're sort of like, Nico isn't saying, oh, I need your story to serve this design. We're saying, oh, how do we figure it out together? And so we sort of do have this mutual inspiration and just bounce things back and forth, which has been like a really nice way to be able to make something.
Now, how did your studio get the attention of Netflix games? That's the big one that everyone wants to know, right?
Let's see. I think, it's a lot of video games.
Your
I think
Uncle Netflix.
Yeah, well, it's like it's a weirdly small industry sometimes, and it's who you know as well. At least to sort of start these conversations. I worked at PlayStation for a long time. I'm doing sort of indie biz dev stuff. I worked with someone named Ray Bautista, who got a job at Netflix a year or two ago. And when he landed there, I was like, hey, just want to say heads up, congrats on the gig. If you guys ever want to talk, I'm working on a new thing. And then that was sort of the start of the conversation. So it's like maybe it's a cheat code to start the conversation. But I think we're making something that maps pretty well to a mobile platform where it's just a 4-directional game and one input button. We always intended to keep the controls really simple, even long before we thought we were. I mean, Nico was like, don't want to do a mobile SKU day one, because we thought we were going to do it ourselves.
More porting work, yeah.
Yeah. But then we were like, oh, we have a porting studio, we can get some resources, we can get Netflix itself. Okay, now it feels more doable. And pretty quickly, I think the game just felt right, not overcomplicated. And it's nice for us, again, to be able to release like a premium game on the App Store, and like my mom can play it with her Netflix password. She's not going to log on to Steam. So I like the idea of reaching a huge amount of people, and I like how it just looks and feels a lot on mobile. So,
Nico, expanding on that, what did partnering with Netflix games open up for you creatively?
I feel like the biggest, like, how can I say, like, resource was like the freedom, right? Like we didn't get like any kind of like restriction in the art direction. Like we never get like I'm always scared of big companies like being like involved too much and blocking our vision and stuff, and it wasn't that at all. So I feel like that was mainly like my takeaway, and also a lot of support in like the platform, like launching the game, like testing the game and stuff like that. That I feel like is always like super expensive, so it's like super helpful to get that.
And I think conversely, actually, it added some constraints in a good way that made us solve challenges in a different way. So when we did sort of a final pass on the camera in the game, we didn't want to do a bunch of different custom camera work for depending on what platform you're playing it on. We were like, oh, can we sort of set the common denominator so it feels great wherever you're playing for it? And once we're accommodating for the fact that people are going to be playing on smaller screens too, it's like, oh, now we have these constraints we can build around, and now I think it just feels good no matter where you play it. And I think generally constraints are what like makes good art probably. And I think it did help our game sort of like being able to like make something that felt good however you were interacting with it.
So when does your game come out, and what platforms will be available at launch?
July 25th. It'll be out on iOS and Android via Netflix. It'll also be out day one on PC and Mac, on Steam and the Epic Game Store, and PlayStation 5 and Nintendo Switch.